So I'm going to try to summarize. Feel free to tell me if you want me to ask or to answer any other specific questions. But my guess is that the majority of our participants today are trainees in PhD types of programs. I'm not sure about that, but I'm a clinician scientist, so took probably a different training pathway than many of you are embarking upon, but also had a very circuitous sort of arc to what I'm doing now. So I think I'm going to focus on that part more so. But I mentioned a clinician. I'm a urogynecologist. I was very interested in science when I was an undergraduate, but probably because of my parents who are doctors, I kind of put that into an aim of going to med school. And to be fairly transparent, that was probably just a sort of, a biased approach to how I went to my undergraduate training. But essentially, when I was an undergraduate, happened upon a laboratory. It was a cellular molecular biology laboratory that I spent 3 years and did some time doing an honors thesis in that laboratory. So it was sort of fortuitous in finding, just as a sophomore student, reached out to a random person who said, sure, come join the lab. So I felt like that, kind of opened up some opportunities for me to look at what basic science research was all about. Went off into medical school and residency training and really felt like I was going to be a clinician. Thought that I was going to be somebody who just saw patients and taught the next generation of doctors, and that was that. But then essentially came back into a situation when I was a fellow. So in the medical pathway of training, we go through our medical school and then residency where you're focusing on a particular area. For me, that was OBGYN because I was really interested in women's health. But then you can also do fellowship training, which is a subspecialized area within that career path. And so chose urogynecology probably more because I really liked the diversity of surgery and clinical stuff that we do. But in doing that fellowship, had some time back in research. And again, at that point in time, thought I was going to do something different than what I'm doing now, probably more clinically focused research, mainly because that's who my mentors were in my fellowship program. So I'm probably telling a story of a little bit of happenstance because stuff kind of happens based on who you end up connecting with, I think. So went through my fellowship training, thought I wanted to do some research. My junior faculty days, got a few foundation awards and things of that nature. Also negotiated a job scenario where I could have some protected time for research and was fortunate to have some support to do that and basically got onto a K award, the K-12, that is has a lot of connections with this Caribou community. But it was really during that time when I was doing a little bit more bench science again, and then kind of thinking about how to meld those two things together, that I had this sort of fortunate situation that I was sitting in a talk with Alan Wolf and Linda Brubaker, and this microbiome stuff kind of caught my eye. My K-12 award was much more about methylation and basically looking at methylation in bladder tissue. So I happened to be in a lab where we were extracting DNA, and so there were a lot of parallel methods to looking at the microbiome. But as a scientist and somebody who's interested in the biology of the microbiome more so, that really caught my eye. And so it started as a side project on my time when I was a K awardee that I started doing a little bit of dabbling in this thing called microbiome sciences. And probably because that's where I'm genuinely more interested in spending time thinking about things, it became the crux of what I'm studying now. So I would love to say that I had this great intentionality about things, but essentially I feel like my career was partially shaped by my own internal persistence. I wanted to do something in research, tried to figure out a career path as a clinician where I could do that, started doing that in more clinically focused research, was able to move that into bench science research because I was able to apply repeatedly and finally get on a K award. And then, so there is a story about the persistence piece there. And then ultimately, I think for what I'm doing today, it was really shaped by this sort of confluence of being fortunate to have mentors that allowed me to go in the direction where my mind wanted to take me, and then just like writing a lot of proposals over and over and over again. Nothing sticks the first time, and I feel like my personal story has been a lot of like circuitous pathways and just doing things over and over and over because maybe I'm a little bit idiotic and don't learn the first time, or maybe I'm just persistent. I'm not sure how many minutes that was, but I'm going to pause there.
I wasn't actually keeping track, but that's great. I actually have a question for you for the general audience because I know you have a short window. Do you find it difficult to migrate that research clinician balance and writing proposals and switching gears to writing medical reports and things like that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there are days where I feel like my mind is going in 5 different directions and I don't actually like it. So it's a double-edged sword, right? Like on one hand, I probably am somebody who gets bored doing the same thing day in and day out. And so having variety in my life keeps me feeling personally fulfilled in my job. If I were a pure clinician, I don't think I would be personally fulfilled in my job. Even though there's variety there, I think I would feel like I'm on this like spinning wheel of doing the same thing over and over. So the research aspect of my career, I think, is where I get to flex my creativity for the most part. And I really feel like my creative brain like takes hold, but I get very frustrated because there are times where I start to go on a mental pathway where I'm jamming, like I'm getting into something where I want to write or I want to do something, and then I have to go to clinic now, or I have this phone call that I have to take care of. And so I do feel a lot of that frustration. I have a lot of little tricks that I've started to employ to help to carve out that time. I use my calendar very strategically, so I calendar out whole 4-hour blocks where I say, no meetings, I'm writing. And so because other people have access to my calendar to schedule things, I have to be very intentional about keeping big chunks of time so that I can focus on research in those moments. I also, from a clinical standpoint, I'm very fortunate to work with a great team, and I rely on my team. So on a day like today, where I'm doing mostly all research and meetings and thinking and stuff like that, I am not opening up my electronic medical record system that is electronic that I can access every place and every time and look at every patient question. I'm going to rely on my nurses and my fellows to take care of those things when I'm absent from that space. And I kind of do internally set those boundaries as much as I can, but yes, it's a frustration. I always want to I probably am a little bit of a thinker, so there are times where in the patient care arena, I want to spend more time thinking about a certain scenario, and I got to get to this meeting. And then on the research side, I want to spend more time thinking about that, and I have to get over there. So answer is yes, and you manage it.
Thank you. And would you mind if any of the individuals in the audience, if they have further questions for a clinician scientist, if they could email you those questions?
I am putting my email in the chat right now in case you, and yes, no problem whatsoever. And I wish I could stay longer. I'm going to stay and linger a little bit, but unfortunately I have a conflict at 3:30, so I'm going to be signing off a little early.
Well, thank you for coming and giving your take on your journey. Dr. Gilbert, if you want to talk about how you developed into who you are today.
Oh my, that's a big question. Sure. I'm Nicole. So my scientific journey also started back in undergrad. Well, maybe even before that. My mom was my high school science teacher, so I was always, interested in science. Took as many of the science classes that were fortunately available in my small town because she offered a lot of them. I went to university at a small liberal arts place in Nebraska called Concordia, and so it didn't have any research. I went majoring in biology and chemistry because I liked it and was good at it, not really knowing what I was going to do with that afterwards, knowing that I didn't want to be a teacher because I would be no good at that. And that was back when like CSI was on TV, so like labs looked cool and had, neon lights and that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, I could probably go work in a lab someday. I applied for one of those like summer research opportunities because I was like, if this is a thing that I think I want to do, I want to at least work in a lab at some point so I know if I like it or not. So I did a summer internship at the University of Nebraska Medical Center and just loved it, thought it was the coolest thing ever. Came home first day telling my husband about like ethidium bromide and that it's, this, right, it wasn't my husband, but anyway. My boyfriend recommended like ethidium bromide, it glows orange and I get to cut things out of a gel. Just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And it was in doing that undergrad research program that I learned, a PhD is a thing that you could get after, getting your bachelor's, and that sounds like maybe that would be cool. And then when I found out that graduate school was free and that they paid you, it seemed like, oh, okay, great. Now I'll just do that. So that was what led me to, going and wanting to get my PhD. Still not really at that point knowing what it really means to be an academic, have your own lab kind of person. I really love being in the lab. And then that was my goal in starting, after approaching graduation from getting my PhD. I knew I wanted to do a postdoc so I could stay being in the lab, and because a lot of my journey was defined honestly more about where I wanted to live than what career I wanted. So I was living in St. Louis and wanted to stay here. I went to St. Louis University for my graduate work, and so I was looking for postdocs here in St. Louis. And I remember telling my PI that I went to choose a new PI, and I was like, hey, you're hiring postdocs. I'd love to work for you, and I don't want to be a PI. I would love to just become a senior person in your lab and just stay with you forever. And that was my life plan. And that worked for quite a while. I knew that I found out early on that I enjoyed writing grants, and so I wanted to still be able to do that. So I helped her with some, but then I also applied for fellowships and got a KO1 mentor fellowship training grant. I also recognized that being in that type of be a senior person in someone's lab, you have to make sure that your salary is covered, and so as much as I could do to help pay for myself was another motivation of leaning into writing those grants. And so all was kind of trucking along with that plan that I had to work with Mandy forever, and then she took a position to move her to San Diego, and I was not interested in moving to California at that point. Fortunately, I found there was I was able to finish out my K here under a different mentor, and at that time I started feeling myself not so averse to the idea of having a lab. And my mentor, encouraged me, keep writing grants. I was a non-tenure tracked investigator at that point, so as a research tracked assistant professor, so I was allowed to write R01s, which I did, and I wrote 2 that they were supposed to be submitted 6 months apart, but then the NIH was doing some crazy things, and they ended up both getting reviewed at the same cycle, and I got them. So then at that point, that's when I really started okay, if I have R01s, I'm going to be hiring people to work on this grant, going to be, doing all the things that are what you do. Maybe I should actually switch tracks and call it what it is. So I was fortunate to be in a good place where that type of career trajectory was possible. And so I was able to pretty simply switch from the research track to the tenure track in the department that I was in. And it took a little bit of time before I had space of my own because they were building a new building and my whole division was going to be moving into that. So when I first started, my mentor let me have a bench in his lab, but then when the new space opened up, we moved, and now I have a lab. And yeah, 7, 8, 10 years ago, if you'd have told me I was going to have my own lab, I would have told you, nah, probably not. But that's where my path led, and I followed it, and I love it. I really enjoy all the things that I thought I wouldn't enjoy about having a lab I actually really do enjoy, so that has been fun. And as much as I used to think that I would miss the bench too much, I don't miss the bench as much as I thought I would. Yeah, so I also don't know how long I've been talking, but I think I'll pause there.
Naz, you got a question?
Yeah, can I ask Nicole a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, because, I think I also have a lab, and 7 or 8, 10 years ago, I would have never thought I would. So my question to you is, why did you not think that you wanted to be a PI when you were in that era earlier on?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me, I think a lot of it was driven by the stress level that I was observing in other people that were doing it, and me not being interested in having that much of a high stress, high stakes, like type of job, honestly. Like it just, since I was my postdoc mentors, I was her first postdoc, right, as she was like just starting her lab, so that was that time where it was like, gunning for tenure, and it's super stressful. And I had small kids, so that was another factor. I wasn't willing to give up the life balance that I appreciated, especially when they were little. I had 2 of them in grad school and 1 of them during my postdoc. And yeah, I wasn't ready to work that hard, I guess, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that life balance, because, I thought my previous careers I was stressed, but grad school and postdoc has shown me a different light. So, yeah, no, I 100% guess with my PI on the screen. So with that, I will move it to Dr. Vanessa Hale and giving her story. And yeah, take it away.
Thanks. Keisha, I just saw your hand up. Did you want to ask Nicole something first?
It was very sneaky hands. Thank you for getting that. It's a question that might be able to be directed towards both of you, so I can wait until afterwards.
Why don't you go ahead and ask, since I know Naz has to step off.
Okay. So I kind of wanted to piggyback on the question that Naz asked and the answer that was given about stress levels that were observed in the PI that you happen to have, Nicole. And I'm curious, as someone who has now entered the role of PI, how has your expectations of stress levels compared, and what do you do in order to kind of maintain them and to be able to focus on the scientific questioning component and to not be so bogged down by the stress of academia?
Oh my. I think you're asking what... I heard 2 questions. One was, how does the stress that I experience now that I actually am a PI compare with what I expected it to be based on what I was observing? And then I think you also asked sort of like how I manage stress or whatever. So I'm glad you asked that, because I kind of wanted to chime in and say, like, hey, as it turns out, now that I am in this position, I haven't found it to be as exhaustingly stressful and terrible as I assumed that it would be. Now, I think a lot of that is because I waited to do it until I was ready. And, there's a lot to say for getting older. We complain about it, but there's a level of, wisdom and maturity and a little more. In my experience, I've become more chill as I got older. So that, yeah. And I probably shouldn't have worried as much about it being as stressful, because my personality is just one that I don't get too hyper worried about things. And that's just, I don't know, just kind of how I am. So unfortunately, I don't have some advice. These are my 7 tricks I do every day to not get overwhelmed. Yeah, I don't know. Did that answer your questions at all?
It did. It gave me hope.
I will say, for me, I'm obviously not at the PI level yet, but I felt like grad school was so hectic and so stressful, and I will say that I learned a lot of life lessons from grad school that I feel like I'm carrying over into my postdoc now, so it's not as bad. So I guess my thing for the trainees in the audience is get some pets, get some hobbies, and take a step back every once in a while, because if you bury your head continuously, you're going to make yourself sick, and you're going to come out with an ulcer after you defend, and you don't want that. So yeah, that's my hot take as a graduate student, postdoc, etc. So yeah, Vanessa.
Thanks. My name is Vanessa Hale. I am an associate professor at the College of Veterinary Medicine at Ohio State University. I am a DVM PhD, but I don't practice clinically, and that's something that I never wanted to practice clinically. I really enjoy studying animal health, but I really enjoy studying it in terms of populations, and so I wanted the clinical degree to understand better a lot more things like anatomy, physiology, disease processes, but I wanted to use that to inform the research that I did. And so it's another type of career path where you might get a clinical degree, but you might not be using that clinical degree in a patient-facing role in the same way. I started out at the University of Georgia with a biology and English degree, and I was pre-med for a little while and pre-law for a little while, and none of those felt like the right fit. And it was my senior year when I started taking animal behavior classes just as an elective, but discovered I really loved studying animals. And I thought I wanted to study animal behavior, but I wasn't totally sure and totally convinced that that was a path that I wanted to jump into right away. But something that I had been doing along the way in undergrad, just as a side job and because I was interested, was in working with Teach for America and recruiting people to explore interest in teaching. And I knew that I really wanted to teach, so I really liked teaching, or thought that I would really like teaching. So I moved out to New Mexico and I taught high school for 3 years, and it turned out I really, really did love teaching. And it also gave me this whole other different life experience. And this is something where, if you're wherever you are in your process, a lot of times you're looking ahead at your next step, like whether that's grad school or postdoc, and you're thinking, oh, how fast can I get there? How quickly can I get this done? I don't have time to take a year off. I don't have time to do life things. And I will say absolutely 100%, this teaching, the time that I took, just kind of developing myself as a professional, learning how to teach, I use those skills every single day now. And I think that would be true if I had chosen to do other things. You learn a lot about yourself, about time management, about communication. And so if there is something that you think you might want to explore, don't let that slide by because you feel like you have to rush into, getting to that end point, like, oh, now I'm finally a PI. So I taught high school. I loved it. During my summers, I pursued some field research opportunities studying animals and continued to love it. In particular, I really loved studying primates and primate behavior. So I would go on trips, or I would go to China and do some field work on monkeys in Guizhou, and loved it. And that ended up becoming my PhD project, where I studied primates and their gut microbiome, both primates that are in captivity and primates in the wild. And I loved studying gut microbiology. It was this whole world of it's ecology, but it's inside of another host where it's you've got all of these factors and they all weigh into host health. And I really liked thinking about host health as for me, the most important factor for evaluating the gut microbiome. So how is it affecting the health of the host ultimately? And that was in animals during my PhD. I then went on to pursue a postdoc, and I thought I wanted to continue, and I applied to all these postdocs and wildlife and wildlife microbiomes, and I wasn't able to get any of them, but I did get a postdoc at Mayo Clinic with their microbiome program studying humans, and I was like, okay, humans, fine, they're kind of like primates. And it turned out to be like the best thing I ever could have done. So I learned about metabolomics, I learned about the germ-free facilities, and it was awesome, the kind of technology and the kind of skills that I learned in this postdoc and continued in the gut microbiome. And I was at that time trying to explore, do I stay at Mayo Clinic? There's some opportunities where I could stay there, or do I look elsewhere? And I still really wanted to ultimately impact animal health. And Mayo Clinic, of course, and rightly so, is 100% dedicated to human health. And so I said, well, how can I work in some animal health layers in there? And at the time I was studying colorectal cancer and the gut microbiome. And colorectal cancer is not similar in animals. They don't get, like, for example, dogs don't get colon cancer the way humans get colon cancer. But in vet school, I learned that dogs get bladder cancer very similar to the way humans get bladder cancer. And so I went to my PI and I said, hey, can I, do a side project where I start exploring things related to bladder cancer? Because I think this is where I can overlap with animal health world, and I'd be really excited about that. And he gave me the go-ahead to do that, and ultimately I found a faculty position that allows me to explore questions related to both human and animal health. And I really love being in that position, kind of stumbled my way here, but really love what I'm doing, and I love that I get to still teach and interact with trainees and explore the ecologies that affect guts and bladders and hosts.
So, is there any general questions specifically focused at Dr. Hale, or do we want to move to the industry representative?
I could ask a question.
Okay.
So one of the things when you went to your postdoc, you went into something that was a little bit different than what you had expected, perhaps, right? So do you think there's been a role of the unexpected in your career path, like the things that you can't predict, which I think probably happened to all of us? How have you dealt with them in your career path?
That's a great question, and never the way that I present it to the NIH. I'm like, I very intentionally did everything with
absolutely
intent. There's so much that's due to luck, and so much that's due to like chance, and factors along the way. So like, I have a spouse. Like, we made some decisions about where to go to grad school around him and his family, and weighing things that were important to him too. But I would say that all of these things enriched who I am as a scientist today. The cons, so like, there is some randomness in there, right? So I was studying, wild monkeys, and then colorectal cancer, and now I'm at bladder cancer, and it makes for, like, I have a less clear, comprehensive path where, like, I've been publishing in bladder cancer and urine for 20 years. That's not my case. And so in some cases, that actually can make it a little bit harder to build a track record, but the skills and kind of the perspective, like, for me, I highly value it for the science perspective, but on paper, it can make it a little bit harder to be like, you've built a, convincing career on, like, a very clear focus. So there's definitely pros and cons to that.
I have another question. I feel like you described such a wealth of wonderful and diverse opportunities, and I'm curious, for trainees who are trying to figure out a way to engage with a new mentee or someone who they aspire to have a mentee, what do you think has been helpful in the instances where you've reached out to ask if you could join a lab, or an experience or exposure to a certain career trajectory or opportunity?
Are you saying, like, what makes a trainee successful in reaching out to a potential mentor? Or are you saying...
Yes. What advice would you give? What has worked for you in the past?
I think I was pretty clueless. I just did like a bunch of cold emails. I looked up people, I looked up their research, I did a bunch of cold emails. Like sitting on the other side of that, I would say be persistent. If you don't hear something back from your first email, it's not because someone doesn't like you or is ignoring you. Their email box is probably just overflowing, and so feel free to email again in a week or 2 weeks. And that is just like, I am never offended if I see something again. It kind of shows some persistence. The other thing is, don't make your email generic. Like, you have access to ChatGPT. Make it focused. Say specifically what you're interested in. Like, look through their research page or look through, things they've published, and keep it brief. So what is your ask? Is your ask to become a PhD student? Is your ask to volunteer in the lab? Is your ask to just have a coffee with them or have a 30-minute Zoom meeting? Be specific so it's not vague, because I can answer a specific question even faster and easier than like a vague, like, can you be my mentor and give me life advice? Which I might say yes to as well, but a specific question is helpful. Is my take on that, but I'm sure there are also other really great takes on that.
I have a question for you, because I know you kind of did your PhD DVM together. So for people that are interested in DVM PhDs or MD PhD programs, how do you keep your brain on track? Because the thought processes behind both are vastly different in the way they do the training. So how do you feel about those two processes, and how did you manage them?
Mine were pretty separated, and others may be able to speak to their programs. So I did 4 continuous years of vet school. I did a year of grad school at the beginning and 2 years of grad school at the end. And then I did some grad school pieces during the summers. So in my brain, time-wise, I was essentially able to separate them out fully. So I was either full-time a vet student or full-time research. And that, for me, was the only way that I could have done it, because to me, vet school, the clinical side of things, asked for so much of me. Now, I know there are some people who are able to navigate like a little bit of research time during their clinical years. That was not something that I could do well like during the middle of a vet school semester. So keeping them separate, but kind of keeping a running thread of like, I want to do gut microbiome research. How can I do a summer program related to gut microbiome research? How can I get some samples that will help with my PhD during this summer? And then being able to fully dedicate to that. And that was also optimizing with my PI to make sure that, we could stay in touch, but also be pretty out of touch for long periods of time while I was in vet school.
Thank you. We're going to switch gears to our final speaker, Dr. Chia-Suei Hung at Air Force Research Laboratory.
Great, thanks, Audra. I hope my sound is coming through okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, sounds good. My network connection is slow, so I don't have my video on. But thank you very much for this invitation. I have to say that my career path, I often like to phrase it as, if you find a fork in the road, you take it. Because my career path is a winding path with lots of branching, lots of decision making. So after my undergrad, I went to a small liberal arts school. I was lucky enough to be able to get admitted into graduate school at Washington University in St. Louis. And the reason why I chose that school was because at that time, I was really interested in virology, oncology, immunology, and microbiology. And I couldn't really decide what I want to go into. So at WashU, the program, everyone gets one degree, same degree. We all get PhD in biology and biomedical sciences with emphasis in certain subspecialties. But the beauty of that is you can be in a program such as immunology. That's where I got my specialty. But you can do your thesis in a totally different program. So I got my degree in immunology, but I did my research in retroviruses. So it's strictly molecular virology. And then after grad school, I decided to come decision to do a postdoc. At that time, my wife was also a graduate student in microbiology program, so we thought, okay, maybe I need to do a postdoc working in a system that I don't need a very high-tech instrument to be able to do my research, so that my wife and I could have lab together, because we work really well together in the kitchen. So we figured if we can cook together, we should be able to manage a lab together. So at that time, so my PhD was, I was doing retrovirus research. I was doing HIV research. And my wife was doing bacterial pathogenesis. So I decided I'm going to switch field, get into bacterial pathogenesis. And so I went into my wife's graduate school lab, working with Dr. Scott Holgren in your pathogenic E. coli. So then this is where my connection with this group, I believe, lays in. So I did bacterial pathogenesis, looking at infection of bladders by your pathogenic E. coli, looking at how bacteria form biofilms on the cell surface as well as inside the bladder cells. So I got into bacterial biofilm and pathogenesis. So during my postdoc, I tried to apply for a faculty position, and I tried for many years, really got no hits, because I really don't know exactly why. I can speculate later. And so I decided to go into industry, actually, helping with a startup company established in a lab in St. Louis. We were looking at screening for antimicrobial biofilm molecules. Worked in the company for a few years. As a startup company, I was one of the 3 research scientists. We did nothing but screening compounds. So I felt like I don't want to be a human robot anymore. So then I decided to go back to academia, became a staff scientist in my postdoc lab. And in fact, that's about when actually Dr. Nicole Gilbert, I met her there. We actually shared lab space together. We have those open lab spaces. And going back to academia, I continue to look for other career opportunities. And after several years, a job ad, I came across a job ad, is to work for the Air Force. And this was a contracting company hiring staff scientists to work for the Air Force to look at the impact of microbial biofilm on aircraft materials. So I thought, okay, I like bacterial biofilm, and I'm doing bacterial pathogenesis on bladder cells. It's the same as bacterial biofilms on aircraft surfaces. And I love airplane, I love microbiology, so I said, hey, this is perfect combination. I pursued that passion and left academia and became a staff scientist at Air Force Research Laboratory. After working there for about 6 months, I was assigned a project to sample aircraft surfaces for microbes. And that's where we hired Audra. The first week after she got hired, we went down to Florida and crawled all over a C-130 transporter fond memory there, Audra, wasn't it? In a Tyvek suit.
At 100 degrees? Yeah.
100 degree Florida heat, and sampling aircraft. And in fact, that aircraft was then later on baked in an enclosure, and we were the first one to go back in with 99% humidity and probably like 105 degrees Fahrenheit sampling. Anyway, I digress from that. But so I stayed working for the Air Force for a while, and then Air Force had a research program to establish synthetic biology research, and because of my molecular biology background, I was assigned to work on that project. And so we established the molecular tools and established programs in synthetic biology. Then in 2018, I was invited to apply to be a federal research scientist working for the Air Force, and I was selected to be the Air Force employee. So I'm currently a federal employee working for the Air Force, continuing with the synthetic biology research. So at the Air Force, they hire you for your expertise, but they don't expect you to continue doing the research for a long time. So we typically work on something for 3 to 5 years, and we either develop technology and push that out into industry so that they can go a bit further, and then the Air Force can buy the things back. And then we go on to do other things. So after a couple of years of research in synthetic biology, then we started working on addressing issues on supply chain issues. So we started working on a project on engineering biology to extract rare earth element. And then now actually I'm working on engineering biology to produce natural rubber. So as for the trainees, as you can see, that I went from immunology, virology, and then now I do synthetic biology and working on natural rubber. And because I am in the materials directorate, we focus a lot on material characterization. So I learned material science, and that's part of our research. And so it's very important for you to learn every step of the way. Along the way, I try to learn something new and really be able to apply myself and to be able to do different type of research when the opportunity comes. So I think I'll just stop there and I'll open for any questions.